Hello, everyone. Chad Frantzen. Welcome to the Kingdom Finance Show. I'm so glad you're here. Hey, on today's show, I'm going to dig into a spiritual aspect about when we think about managing finances, being a good steward, good manager, good leader. What does Scripture say about that? And then what are some practical applications that we can apply in our roles and responsibilities right where we are today? So before we dive in, thanks so much for following us here on the Kingdom Finance Show. And again, our goal here is to help bring clarity out of chaos and give you good teaching advice, coaching advice on how to invest, how to manage, how to lead the resources God's given you with a biblical perspective, or what I like to call a kingdom worldview. So glad you're here. Please like and subscribe to the show. Pass it along to other friends and family members, if you will. It really helps us out. If you know people who say, hey, I really do want to apply my biblical values, a Christian worldview to how I'm managing resources, how I'm managing people, how I'm serving others in the workplace, and whether it's for profit, not for profit. Really appreciate that. All right. So on today's show, I'm not going to cover any economic data or things like that. I really want to take a step back and just provide a spiritual application to why we do what we do when we talk about being a kingdom impact investor. Now, Jesus spoke in parables, oftentimes in the New Testament, and a couple parables that are most commonly associated with money, with being a good steward of one's resources. Now, let me pause for a second. When I say resources, that can be any number of things. It can be talents and abilities. It can be gifts. Certain children at a young age are very talented at athletics or at acting or singing. Those are all resources that are God-given abilities that vary from person to person. So just because I say resources doesn't mean I'm talking about money. It does include that, but it's much, much more when we think about the resources, the gifts, the talents, the abilities, the insights, the innovation, the creativity, the imagination, right, that God gives us. That's resources is kind of how I'm trying to grab all of those terms into one. Now, when Jesus talked about managing resources, managing finances, two parables really come to mind. I want to cover those, and I've got some points here just to make on practical applications for how we do that as a kingdom impact investor. Luke 16 talks about the parable of the shrewd manager, or the unjust steward, as it's often referred to as. And it's interesting that this manager was working for a rich man, and but he had become quite lazy at his job, right? And as it says in Luke 16, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. And so the rich man called the manager and said, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer." So the manager had been lazy, careless, whatever we want to call it. But he got very motivated when the rich man who was his boss reached out to him. And so he goes on to go back to all the different clients of the rich man to negotiate terms on people who had not paid for everything from olive oil to various other things that people were not paying. And so he went and negotiated. He negotiated with them. He became shrewd in a business setting. Now he's doing what we call transactional money here. And he came back to the master, and the rich master commended this fairly dishonest, lazy manager, because he had actually acted shrewdly. He had gotten up off his butt. He had gone out and negotiated terms for people to pay his boss who were not paying. And it's interesting here. The point I want to make is that Jesus talks about this, and he says, he commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. it says in Luke 16, verse 8. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, you should use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it's gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. And in verse 10, it says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little is also going to be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches? And verse 13, it says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And, a couple of things here is that when we think about stewardship, management, leadership in today's world, right, those are very synonymous terms, right? In a spiritual Christian sense, we often say stewardship, but in the business secular sense, where I work week to week, we talk about managers, we talk about leaders, leader managers, servant leaders, directors, and so the same concept applies where how do we think through how we are honest and trustworthy and how we operate with shrewdness and integrity in our day-to-day work, right? Whether it's in investing our money or managing a company or working at a church or a nonprofit or raising children at home, right? And the key verse here in verse 13, where it says you cannot serve both God and money, one of the important things we have to do as successful kingdom-minded leaders, managers, stewards is we cannot allow greed and pride to come in against success. And so one of the key ways we prevent this is just having a heart of generosity, kind of following the principle of gratitude, like always expressing gratitude to people around you, no matter how well you know them or don't know them. But also when it comes to financial success, however you're defining that in the work God's called you to do, is that you view it as just something that you're managing for the Lord, that you're managing for your Father in heaven. It doesn't define you in your identity. And so if we can distance ourselves from that, then we're serving God, but we are stewarding the resources, whether it was money or talents or abilities. In this case, it's talking about money in Luke 16. But we have to get in alignment with, we're actually serving the Lord. It just happens to be through the use of financial management, investing, running companies, things of that nature. So it's really important for us to pray that the Lord will give us wisdom and revelation, so that in whatever we're stewarding, that we do not fall victim of pride and greed. And one of the greatest ways we can fight against that is obviously we need to pray to the Holy Spirit to help us, right? He is our teacher and our guide, but also we need to operate in whatever field you're in as an investor, a leader, a manager, a director. We need to operate with a spirit of generosity, wanting to give out of the fruit that we're harvesting, right? Very generously and from our first fruits. And also just really practicing a true heart of gratitude, just being thankful, week in, week out, day in, day out. I know for me, that can be a challenge because I'm going from week to week with family stuff, kid stuff, work stuff, all these different things, right? But just to pause, even in those minutes when we're in the car or in between meetings or during a meeting, and just expressing to God our gratitude for what He has done and what He's put us in charge of to steward, right? Because as I like to quote A.W. Tozer, who was a U.S. pastor and prophet back in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. All of life is worship. So there truly is no divide between sacred and secular, even though the media and governments want to tell you, hey, you have to keep everything separate. But one of the things the Jewish people learned, and that we can learn from them, is that everything, the whole rhythm of work and play and family and going to synagogue for the Jews, church for us, it's all worship, because it's all an opportunity to give our time, to give our resources back to the Lord as an offering. So that's from Luke 16. And what I want to pick up on is some notes of just how can we practically apply this in life as leaders, managers, investors, stewards. Of course, there's a very popular parable I'm not going to cover today, but the parable of the talents. We read about that in Matthew 25, Luke 19. Similar situation, right? To one, he gives 5 talents, to one, he gives 3, and to another, he gives 1, right? And we all know the story, right? I mean, the ones with the 5 and the 3 talents, they took some risk. They invested that money, and it returned back additional talents to the owner. But the person who was just given the 1, they were scared. They had a very much a poverty mindset of what they were stewarding. And we don't know if they were comparing themselves to others, but they refused to take any risk because they did not view the landowner, the boss, as having a good heart, as being kind, as being fair. And so we have to view God as a just God, but also as our Father who gives us talents, abilities, resources to steward. But stewardship is not just sitting on it, putting the money under the mattress, as the old saying goes. It's actually about taking risk. It's actually about stepping out with where God has you, with your network, with the level of education you have, with the contacts you have, and just with some of the passions in your heart to go out and actually plant those seeds into good soil so that they can return a harvest. Because that's what the Lord wants, right? Whether he gives you ideas and imagination, whether he gives you creativity to write or to be a teacher, or whether it's financial resources to invest and to grow and to compound. These are all things that in that parable of the talents, where we want to be like the one with the 3 and the 5. We want to be willing to take the risk to go out, to get educated, to learn, right? And to find opportunities where we can get a return, we can compound the talents and abilities that God himself has given us. And that's the same way with finances. What I want to share with the rest of our time on today's episode of the Kingdom Finance Show is this concept in business that's called the triple bottom line. And so when we think about the parable of the shrewd manager, the parable of the talents, I wanted to give that as some context just from the Word of God. And now to say, okay, well, how do we practically do that? One of the things my wife often tells me is when we learn a concept or we get inspired by a preacher or a speaker or a podcast, it's like, what's the practical? Like, what do I actually do? How do I actually step my foot into that? What are the 1 or 2 things that I do? Let's get really practical on that. So a concept in the business world of a triple bottom line has been around for some time. And I was doing a little research on this, but this really started with, you think about the U.S. economy, and coming out of World War II, many people came back, started families, the baby boomer generation, and many of them worked for, many of these men worked for major American companies, kind of iconic American companies like Coca-Cola, General Electric, General Motors, Kodak. And you went to those type of companies and you worked for 30, 40, 50 years, and the company took care of you. There was a measure of loyalty to the people. And so they had pension plans that provided for retirement income. They had healthcare benefits that were for, their whole life, even after they retired. Now, over the course of the 80s and the 90s, and certainly now into the 2000s, we do not see major corporations doing that, right? It's too much of a drag on profitability because we don't want to continue to pay people who have already retired 20 years ago a pension or pay for their health care. And so this concept really came out that companies need to start thinking a little more conscious of what's the impact across three different categories, not just profit. So profit is one, people is the second category. How do they measure the impact, the success, the return that they're having on people, on people's lives, on people's well-being? Much like the example of companies of yesteryear in the United States that would take care of those employees well after they retired out of loyalty, right? And then the third category, and this was in a corporate study called the triple bottom line. It was profit, people, and the planet. And much of this has gained popularity in the secular press and in the media. We have what's called ESG, socially responsible stewardship of Fortune 500 companies. And so I'm not going to dig too deep into that. What I want to do with the time I have left here on today's show, again, we're talking about how do we really apply these concepts that Jesus teaches us in the parable of the shrewd manager and the parable of the talents. How do we walk in truth and shrewdness and integrity? How do we walk? How do we practically do that to be one of the people who has the 3 of the 5 talents that's actually taking risk, investing what we've been given to get a return, to see it compounding back so that we can give glory to God. So in the secular world, they call this triple bottom line: profit, people, and planet. Now, what I want to share is how do we land the plane from a kingdom mindset around those 3 things? And when we think about profit, right, if you're profit only, you are one type of leader manager, right? In my own industry, in the industry I work in as a financial advisor, a certified financial planner, I can apply that myself. So we can look at financial advisors, we can look at CEOs, we can look at investors, right? You can really put this on any type of role. I'm just calling this role a leader manager, right? So using that triple bottom line, and let's apply it to us as Christians, as people who want to be disciples of doing what the word says in word and deed, both in our families, with our money, with our businesses, with our time. Let's talk about it. So there's really 3 types. There's going to be 3 types of leader managers. So when we apply that parable, the first one is just what I'm going to call profit only. It's a secular only focus. If you are a Judeo-Christian belief system around you, it's mutually exclusive. Many people in here are not necessarily following a Judeo-Christian worldview, but those that are really just operating profit only. They have completely separated the secular aspect of life from the sacred aspect of life, and work is work, and worship is worship, and that's over here. Okay, so that's kind of level 1, the type of leader manager. Right. And so this is, again, CEOs, this is financial advisors, this is retirees, stay-at-home parents. This fits, no matter where you are. You can be a student, you can be a college student. So if you're only looking from a secular perspective, it's a very, very narrow focus. It's just focused on financial gain, profitability. Nothing wrong with that, but that's all that's involved in level 1 of a leader manager. Now, level 2, much like my example that I started with, the companies in the US from the 1950s and 60s, the General Electrics and General Motors and Coca-Cola, those companies were very focused on their product, right? To create profitability, to create earnings, to return value to their shareholders. However, they were also very committed to their people. So they measured how well their profits were, but they also tracked and measured. We would call those KPIs, key performance indicators of their people, how well they were investing into their people, into their community, into their people even after they had retired from the company. So again, let's apply that from a kingdom investor standpoint. When we look at profit, a profit focus and a people focus, we're actually seeking to apply biblical values into what we're doing, right? We actually are, unlike level one, where it's only profits. At level two, it's profit plus people. And so the Christian business owner, the Christian-minded investor, they are seeking to apply biblical values, but it often only gets minimal absorption. And so you see a lot of servant leadership in this level two. When it comes to cultural issues and decision making, it's sporadic at best. This type of leader manager may or may not take a huge stand against things that are going on in culture, which we could talk about today with so many things that are divisive with the transgender movement and the abortion movement, right? There's so many things out there that are clearly against what the Bible says, that what Jesus taught, but your leader managers here may or may not make a stand. Some will not, because they don't want to sacrifice their reputation, their profitability, their market share, or really what other people think about them. So level two is good. We're moving towards people. We're moving towards servant heart. We're moving towards community involvement, but we don't have a real plan at level two. There's not a defined, repeatable process on how we can continually make a social impact on people, on community, on causes and things that are in alignment with a biblical worldview, right? And we're talking about this today from a kingdom perspective for Christ followers, right? So at best, at level two, we're probably what I would call a negative screen. We might say no to supporting certain things, but we're not going to make a huge stand, primarily because we don't have a defined process for how to do it, to stand up for biblical values, to stand up for what we would call pro-life, biblical marriage, First and Second Amendment rights. We feel it in our heart, but we're not making a huge stand because we're not exactly sure, where do we go? How do we do it? We do it here and there, but not with a super defined process. So level two, leader, manager, investor, right? You move from profit only to profit and people. So you're looking a lot of growth here at level two. Now, level three of the leader manager types is one that, going back to that triple bottom line, right? That from that secular analogy of what businesses have been doing in corporate America for 20, 30 years, really been focusing on this triple bottom line: profit, people, and the planet. So for the kingdom-minded manager, kingdom-minded CEO, director, investor, level three is where it's what we want to aim for, right? I mean, it's the parts of the shrewd manager that the owner liked. It's the parts of the person with the 3 and the 5 talents where they took ownership and management, and they planted their seed in good soil for a return. So level three is profit, people, and kingdom purpose. So profit, people, purpose. So in the secular world, it's just planet, and maybe it's more on global warming and carbon footprint and things like that. I don't have a problem with that. However, with a kingdom-minded person, we're thinking otherworldly. So we're actually thinking through profit, people, and then kingdom purpose. So this is a fully integrated approach to the triple bottom line, where everything the CEO, investor, director, financial advisor in my industry, this is the lens by which things are filtered. What they say yes to, what they say no to, how they grow their company, how they invest their money, how they give, what ministries, what churches, what movements they're a part of that are spreading the gospel. And, we think about Matthew 28:18 and the Great Commission. This is where it all comes together. And so as my friend Billy Epperhart says, this is the secret sauce. When we can do all three, not that we're ever going to do it perfectly, but if we at least are aware of how we evaluate what we're doing with our resources of time, of talent, of connection, of finance, of innovation. This is really the level 3 of that triple bottom line where all of them are coming together, right? So in this level, you have an integrated process. It's defined. You can measure it. You're very pro-values focused, as I would call it. Not only are you saying no to investing in or shopping at companies that violate biblical values, you're looking for companies. You're looking for things that actually support biblical values, that actually support pro-life, biblical marriage, sanctity of life, human flourishing, right? Helping people get out of poverty, helping educate people to become entrepreneurs and to be educated, right? And so this is what we call really operating at the top level of all the spheres of culture. So if we call that the 7 spheres of culture, you're actually looking for opportunities to use your resources in all those parts of life. And this truly is when work becomes worship. It becomes life-giving beyond just, hey, I have a good job. So one of the challenging things here is, how do you make sure that the time I have during the week is being used I'm using that time as a good disciple, right? That's something I've been challenged with, of like, well, is the time I'm using today to record this, or the time I'm using at a meeting tomorrow, am I using it in the best way possible as a disciple of Jesus, right? Is what I'm doing, am I looking to bring the glory of God into that with my talents and abilities, and to draw it out of other people who have talents and abilities that I do not have? How can I draw that out like a deep well of other people, to call them up into greatness, to call them up into their calling and their design of how that they can glorify God, because they have unique creativity. They have a different set of resources that I have. And that's really when we can come together, right, and collaborate to mutually sow our seeds, sow our resources in these good soil. That's really this triple bottom line. It's that level 3 of a leader, manager, investor, that involves profit, right? We're looking for transactional opportunities, but we're also looking for transformational opportunities in the people that we're around, in the organizations that we support, and in the kingdom purposes that we are helping to fund to advance the Great Commission of Matthew 28:18. Well, I hope that's been helpful. I wanted to take some time today to really unpack just some of why we do what we do as business owners, as investors. All of you are leaders with where God has you to. And what I want to encourage you with as we close, the great businessman, motivational speaker, Jim Rohn, once said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. And I want to challenge each of us, myself included, is, well, who do I want to become? And what do I want to be about? When I'm talking with people, who are the type of people that I need to be around? What has God called me to be, that the 5 people I need to spend the most time with would help to encourage me, to catalyze me, to really sow the seeds that I have for my resources, my finances, my time, my talents, my creativity, the best way possible to be a shrewd manager, to be a wise manager of God's resources. And so for some of us, we can control that, like really prayerfully considering, well, okay, What type of people do I need to be around? Whether it's friends, whether it's mentors, whether it's leaders, employers. This is key to us really growing as a steward, as a manager of God. We can't control what's happening in media or politics. We play our part, right? We go and vote our values and biblical ethics. We invest and spend using biblical ethics in a way that does not violate what the Word of God says. But at the end of the day, we choose as disciples, what do we want to be about, right? And so I encourage each of us just to look around and see what God has put in your hand. And that is really the ground we want to be disciples in. And so as Jesus said, in John 8, like those who abide, those who continue with him, those are the people who are his true disciples. And as we close on today's show, I'm challenged just in my own business, my family, my finances, of how do I continue? How do I abide? As Jesus said in John 8:31, how do I continue and abide in that with him? Not just my own ideas, right? I mean, that's the point of the parables, is that they were stewards. They saw it as an art, as an act of worship in the work that they were doing, whatever it was. And so with that, I think, and I'll talk about this more on a future show. I'm working on some notes for it. How do we really become disciples? How do we continue to abide in what we're doing? This is a start today, talking about the different types of leader, managers, investors. Again, the triple bottom line: profits, transactional opportunities, people, and kingdom purpose, transformational opportunities. I believe that really addresses part of what Jesus is after when it comes to our stewardship, to our investments. And first and foremost, we believe in Jesus, but we also have to believe in the Word of God. And the Word of God is very clearly on a lot of things that are going on in society today that we do not need to be supporting, that we need to be speaking out against. And that starts with you and I, right where we are in your city and with your family. So I want to say thank you for being a part of the Kingdom Finance Show. Thanks for encouraging me, those of you who reach out and let me know that you're watching and listening. And again, I pray that you will be well and that God will show you, how do you walk as a kingdom-minded leader, manager, and how do you really walk as a disciple with Jesus in the resources and in the gifts and talents that he has given you and has given those around you. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time on the Kingdom Finance Show. Take care.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Kingdom Finance Show. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps to get the word out. For more resources on becoming a kingdom investor and to connect with us directly, visit our website at wealthbuilders.net. That's wealthbuilders.net. We'll see you next time on the Kingdom Finance Show. The content provided is for educational purposes only. We encourage you to seek personalized investment advice from your financial professional. For all tax and legal advice, please consult your CPA or attorney. Investment advisory services are offered through Authentic Counsel, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cabin Securities, a registered broker-dealer. The content of this podcast does not constitute an offer of securities. Offerings can only be made through an offering memorandum, and you should carefully examine risk factors and other information contained in the memorandum.